I didn't believe in death, not really. I mean, sure, I knew people died. You read about it online or see it in the news, but it always felt like something that happened to other people, not me. Not someone young, someone with plans, friends, a future. I thought I had time, plenty of it. Time to figure things out, time to change, time to live however I wanted, and maybe think about God later. But death didn't wait for me to figure anything out. It came on a day that looked just like any other, and when it came, it tore reality in half. That morning, I woke up the way I always did, barely conscious, half buried under my blanket, the glow of my phone screen lighting up my face before I even moved. Notifications, messages, a couple memes, someone complaining about school again, the usual. My mom called from downstairs telling me to get up, and I ignored her like always, scrolling through TikTok like it was the most important thing in the world. I didn't pray. I didn't think about anything deeper than what I was going to wear, or whether I'd be late again. God, heaven, hell, those weren't part of my day. They weren't part of my life. I wasn't angry at religion or anything. I just didn't care. It didn't feel relevant. Faith was for old people or really intense types, not someone like me. I believed in being a decent person. That should be enough, right? I eventually dragged myself out of bed, got dressed, and grabbed my backpack. It was cold outside, the kind of cold that makes your breath fog up, but I didn't even notice. My mind was racing with weekend plans and school drama. I had tests I hadn't studied for and group chats blowing up about who said what behind whose back. I was walking through life blind, not because I couldn't see, but because I didn't want to see. Nothing felt urgent, nothing felt serious. Life was just happening, and I was just coasting. At lunch, things were loud and chaotic, like they always were. My friends were joking around. Food was being thrown across tables. Someone was filming a prank in the corner. I laughed so hard I almost choked when one of my buddies did an impression of our math teacher. It felt good, safe, normal. The kind of day you don't think twice about. But I remember that moment so vividly now because it was the last time I laughed before everything changed. After lunch, I walked back to my locker, the hallway buzzing with noise. Someone tapped me on the shoulder, one of my classmates, smiling, asking if I wanted to walk outside for a bit before the next bell. I said sure, slammed my locker shut, and we pushed through the doors together. It was bright outside, windy but clear. I remember squinting against the sunlight and thinking I wished I'd brought a hoodie. We were halfway across the lot when it happened. I heard it first, the sound of tires screeching against pavement, high and sharp like something tearing. I turned my head and everything slowed down. A truck, way too fast, way too close. My friend screamed. I didn't even have time to turn away, to jump, to run. Nothing. The impact hit me like a wall and suddenly the world exploded. Pain. Not like a broken bone or a scraped knee. It was total. It was everywhere. It felt like my body was being shattered and thrown into the air. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. No sound, no pain, no ground beneath my feet. For a moment, I thought I was unconscious. Maybe this was what it felt like to black out. But then I realized I wasn't unconscious. I was awake, fully awake, just not where I was supposed to be. I looked down and felt my stomach twist into something I can't describe. My body was lying on the pavement, still, broken. People were rushing over. Someone was on their phone, yelling for help. My friend was crying, kneeling beside me, shaking me. But I wasn't there. I was watching it all from above, like I'd been yanked out of my own skin and left behind. My first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. How can I be looking at myself? Why can't I touch the ground? And then I felt it. A pull. It wasn't a hand. It wasn't even physical. It was like something inside me, something deeper than bones or blood, was being dragged away. At first, I resisted. I fought against it, mentally screaming for help, for someone to pull me back. But there was no resisting this. It was stronger than anything I had ever felt. It didn't care what I wanted. It was taking me somewhere, and I had no say in it. That's when the fear started, because even though I couldn't see where I was going, I could feel it. The warmth of the sun was gone. The noise of the parking lot faded. Everything around me dimmed, and the cold set in. Not the kind you feel in your skin, but something that gripped your soul. I was slipping into something beyond this world. I didn't know it yet, but I had died. And where I was going next would change everything I believed about life, death, and the eternity that waits just beyond it. The pulling got worse. It was like invisible chains had wrapped around my soul and were dragging me backward through space, except there was no space. No ground, no sky, no sense of up or down. Just movement through endless black, like I was falling in slow motion through a place that hated light. I wasn't flying, I wasn't floating, I was being taken, and the deeper I went, the heavier everything felt. My body wasn't even with me anymore. I could sense it far above, like a memory that was already starting to fade. This wasn't a dream, and it wasn't my imagination. Something had grabbed me from the world of the living, and it wasn't letting go. I kept trying to make sense of what was happening. Was this what dying felt like? I always thought you'd feel peace, or float toward a light, or see your ancestors waiting for you on some cloud. But there was no light here, just darkness that moved like it was alive. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I knew I wasn't alone. There were whispers, faint at first, like wind stirring dead leaves. But they grew louder, words I couldn't fully understand, spoken in languages that didn't belong to this world. Some hissed, some growled, others mocked. And even though I didn't know exactly what they were saying, I understood the message. I wasn't welcome. I was claimed. The cold grew worse. It wasn't just physical, it felt like it was freezing who I was, freezing the core of me. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have a voice. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. I wanted to call out for someone to save me, but in that place, hope didn't exist. There was no sense of time. It could have been seconds, or it could have been centuries. The deeper I went, the more the darkness pressed in, not just around me, but into me, like it was trying to erase every part of who I had been. And then it stopped. Like someone had slammed the brakes on reality, everything froze. The whispers died, the pulling halted. The cold didn't just ease, it vanished completely, and in its place, light. But this wasn't like any light I had ever seen. It didn't just shine, it burned. Not in a painful way, but in a way that made every inch of the darkness tremble. This light was alive. It wasn't a glow. It was a presence, a power. And then I saw him. I didn't need an introduction. I didn't need someone to tell me who he was. I knew instantly, without question, without hesitation, Jesus, standing in the center of that blazing light, his form clearer than anything else around me. Not the long-haired, soft-painting version I'd seen in Sunday school. This was glory. This was authority. This was the source of all creation wrapped in a form I could recognize, but not fully comprehend. I couldn't look away. His eyes met mine, and I felt everything inside me collapse. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. Just being in his presence was like having every lie I'd ever told peeled away, every sin I'd ever committed exposed, every excuse I'd ever made burned into nothing. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think clearly. His gaze didn't just look at me, it looked through me, past my smile, past the image I showed the world, past the justifications and the casual dismissals, straight into the truth. And yet, he didn't turn away. He didn't glare at me in anger. He didn't mock me or point out my failures. His eyes, though full of sorrow, were also full of something else, something I didn't expect. Love. A love so overwhelming, so complete, it crushed me, because in that moment I realized I had spent my life ignoring him, laughing off faith, pretending I had time, and now I was standing face to face with the one I had ignored. He finally spoke, and his voice didn't just echo, it filled the space. It wasn't loud, but it shook everything. "Do you know why you are here?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you answer that? What do you say when you're in the presence of the very one who gave you life and you know you've wasted it? He didn't wait for me to find the words. He raised his hand, and suddenly the darkness around us melted away, replaced by vision after vision, moment after moment from my life. I saw myself as a child, innocent and open. I saw the first time I lied to my parents. I saw times I mocked people to fit in, times I ignored someone who needed help, times I chased pleasure instead of purpose. I saw my choices, the ripple effects, the pain I caused without even realizing it. But what made it unbearable wasn't the memories, it was the fact that I felt them. Every person I'd hurt, I felt their pain. Every time I'd chosen selfishness, I felt the impact. I wasn't just watching my life, I was living every consequence of it, not as punishment, as truth, raw, unavoidable, complete truth. Then the visions shifted. The scenes of my life faded, replaced by something far more terrifying. A world crumbling, fires sweeping across cities, people running in panic, demonic shapes moving through the smoke, whispering lies into ears that eagerly listened. I saw families torn apart, not by war or famine, but by deception, by spiritual blindness. And the most horrifying part? People were walking straight into the destruction, laughing, smiling, oblivious, like nothing was wrong. I turned to Jesus and he said 6 words I will never forget. This is what is coming. As soon as he spoke, the vision stopped and everything around us dimmed again. Not into the same darkness I'd come from, but something different, heavier, more final. And I realized something that shook me more than anything else. This wasn't about me anymore. What he was showing me wasn't just my judgment. It was a warning, a glimpse of what waits for so many others, unless something changes. The visions didn't stop. Even after Jesus finished speaking, the images kept coming, faster, more vivid, more terrifying. It was like a flood of reality being poured directly into my soul. I saw people stumbling through life like I had, chasing distractions, temporary highs, empty relationships, all while ignoring the deep, aching void inside them that only God could fill. They didn't see it, and they didn't care, just like I hadn't. And then the scenes turned darker. I saw flames, not symbolic, real, towering, alive and consuming. I was no longer standing beside Jesus, I was falling. And it wasn't a gentle drift. It was like being yanked into a pit, the heat increasing with every passing second, the air becoming too thick to breathe. I couldn't scream, I couldn't speak, I couldn't even cry. I was just falling into this endless abyss, and around me shadows began to move. Not just shadows, shapes, twisted, broken things, creatures that didn't belong in any world I'd ever imagined. They weren't human, they weren't animals. They were hate and torment given form, and their eyes glowed with something worse than fire, something like hunger, a spiritual hunger aimed directly at me. I landed, not on ground, but into a space that felt like it had no floor. It gave under me like thick tar or oil, except it was somehow dry and suffocating at the same time. There was no light, only flickers of red and orange in the distance, like someone had buried hellfires under the surface. All around me, people were screaming, not just crying out in pain, but wailing in a way that shattered the soul. It was hopelessness, pure, full-body despair that made you want to stop existing just to escape it. Faces emerged in the flickering light. They were twisted with pain, rage, regret. Some looked lost, others looked furious, but all of them had one thing in common. They had no way out. One face locked eyes with me and my heart stopped. I knew him, a guy I used to hang out with after school. We weren't close, but we joked around, laughed at dumb memes, talked about nothing important. He'd always shrugged off religion, called it brainwashing. I'd laughed along, and now he was here. His mouth moved, trying to speak, but no words came out. His eyes were pleading, desperate, filled with the kind of terror you can't imagine unless you've seen it. Then finally, I heard it. Not out loud, not with my ears, but deep inside. a whisper that echoed like a scream. "Caleb, help me." I reached toward him, pure instinct, driven by guilt, horror, anything just to pull him away from this place. My hand stretched out, only for something cold and solid to clamp down around my wrist. A force stronger than gravity yanked me backward. And then he was there again. Jesus, not with wrath, not with fury, but with authority that silenced everything around us. The screams, the shadows, the heat. It all paused, like reality had obeyed his presence. "You cannot help them now," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was heavy, with sorrow, with finality. I couldn't look away from my friend. I watched as his face disappeared into the flames. I felt my insides crack. "Why?" I choked out, broken. "Why is he here?" Jesus looked at me, eyes full of pain. "Because he chose this." I wanted to argue. No one would choose something like this. Not if they understood. Not if they saw what I was seeing. But then I remembered all the times we laughed at faith. All the times we said it was a waste of time. All the chances we had and ignored. And suddenly, I understood. Hell isn't filled with people God hates. It's filled with people who rejected him, who silenced that quiet whisper in their soul again and again, until there was nothing left to hear. And then Jesus said something that made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. "This is only the beginning." I could still feel the heat. I could still smell the burning, like flesh and sulfur, thick and metallic. But we were no longer in that place. The scenery changed, not like a dream, not like a movie cut. It shifted, like I had passed through some invisible curtain. We were standing in a vast emptiness, surrounded by a barrier of light, and I realized what was beyond it. The demons. They weren't hiding anymore. They were all around us. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Their forms flickered like smoke, shifting between shadows and shapes I couldn't fully process. No two looked the same, but they all had the same eyes. Hollow, glowing, hateful. They couldn't step into the light that surrounded me and Jesus, but they didn't need to. They stood just at the edge, watching, whispering, waiting. I felt their gaze. I heard their voices, not out loud, but inside, like poison thoughts injected straight into my mind. "You don't belong there. You think he'll keep you? You were always ours. You're just like the others. Fake." I tried to shut them out, but the voices kept coming. Some mocked, some accused, some laughed, cruel and slow. "Soon," one hissed, "soon the light won't protect you." I turned to Jesus, shaking. "Why are they saying this? Why do they know me?" He didn't look away from them. "Because every time you chose sin, they gained ground. Every time you ignored me, they drew closer." It hit like a hammer. I had let them in, not all at once, not with some giant evil decision, but slowly, quietly, one compromise at a time, one ignored conviction, one sin I called no big deal. I didn't have to worship them. I just had to keep pretending my choices didn't matter. And in that silence, they grew stronger. Jesus stepped forward, raising his hand. A wave of power burst from him, and the demons shrieked in pain. Some scattered like ashes in wind, others melted back into the shadows, but a few stood their ground, watching, waiting. Jesus turned back to me, his voice low and firm. "This battle is not for your body, it's for your soul." The weight of those words hit me harder than anything before. My soul, my eternity, every choice I had made, every moment I had brushed off like it meant nothing. This was the cost. And yet I was still standing in the light. Not because I deserved to, but because he wasn't finished with me. Not yet. The light around us began to shift, not fading, but changing in tone, warmer, brighter. And then I saw it. Stretching endlessly in front of me were gates, towering, majestic, unlike anything I've ever seen on earth. They shimmered, not like metal or stone, but with something living. The surface moved, not physically, but spiritually, like it pulsed with the very presence of God. My soul reacted before my mind could catch up. It wanted to run toward them, not out of fear, not even curiosity, but because those gates felt like home. A home I didn't even know I was missing until that moment. Everything in me ached to go through them. It was like something deep inside had been homesick its entire life without knowing it, and suddenly that ache was screaming to be filled. This wasn't just heaven. This wasn't just paradise. This was belonging, perfection, peace, the end of every question. The place where identity and purpose didn't need to be figured out because they were already known. I took a step forward, but then I stopped. Something felt off, like I was missing something important. And then I saw it. Across from the gates, beyond the field of light, a shadow. Not just a shape, but an entire horizon cloaked in it. An endless expanse of black that swallowed light the way a hole swallows sound. And from that void came noise. Not the same screams I'd heard earlier. These were worse. These were the sounds of people still fighting, still resisting, still begging. And even though the gate stood in front of them, they were being pulled backward, screaming, trying to claw their way toward the light, toward salvation, toward hope. But the pull from the shadow was too strong. It dragged them down, and I could do nothing but watch. I wanted to shout, to run toward them, to grab their hands and tell them it wasn't too late, but it was. Jesus stood beside me again. His face was calm, but not distant. He wasn't unmoved. He was deeply moved, with sorrow, with pain, with compassion so deep it made my own chest ache just to look at him. He watched as people were pulled into the dark, their eyes locked on the gates, their mouths forming silent pleas, their hands grasping at air that wouldn't hold them. I looked at him, shaking. Why? They're calling for you. Can't they come in? He nodded slowly. They say my name, but they never knew me. That answer shattered something inside me. These weren't atheists or criminals. These weren't people I would have guessed to be lost. They looked like good people. Some wore crosses, some held Bibles, some looked like they'd just come from church. And yet, the gates stayed shut. They prayed, I whispered, the question hidden in my voice. They prayed, Jesus said, but their hearts were far from me. They lived by ritual, not relationship. They honored me with words, but not with surrender. I felt like I was choking. It was too much, too final, too terrifying. They had been so close, steps from heaven, inches from the light. But when the time came, their choices caught up with them. They hadn't given Jesus their hearts. They'd given him their habits. I turned my eyes away. I couldn't watch anymore. And then, for a split second, our eyes met, Jesus and I. And I felt something different, not fear, not judgment, but an overwhelming awareness that I had never really known him either. I had believed in him. I had heard about him. I had even whispered his name when I was scared or wanted something, but I had never followed him. I had never surrendered. I had treated God like a backup plan, like insurance for someday, like background noise in a busy life. I felt exposed more than I had during my life review, because this wasn't about what I had done anymore. It was about who I had chosen. His eyes were still on mine, not angry, but searching, deep, eternal. You were made for me, he said quietly, but you lived like you didn't need me. I dropped to my knees, undone. I had no defense, no words, no excuses, just the crushing realization that I had nearly joined the voices I'd just watched being dragged into the dark. I felt like I was splitting open with regret, like my soul was tearing from the weight of knowing I had ignored the only one who ever truly loved me. But he didn't walk away. He stepped closer. His presence didn't burn, it healed. Even in my guilt, even in my shame, I felt peace rush over me like a wave. His hand rested gently on my shoulder, and when he spoke again, his voice was low but fierce. Do you understand why I brought you here? I shook my head, barely able to breathe. Number I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve this. None of them did, he said. Not the ones who made it through the gates. They weren't saved because they were perfect. They were saved because they surrendered, because they knew me, and I knew them. The gates shimmered behind us, still open, still glorious, still home, but I wasn't being called through them. Not yet. The ground beneath us shifted again, not crumbling, not falling, but revealing, and suddenly I was somewhere else. The sky was darker, the ground cracked, the air burned with something unseen. All around us, the earth tore open, cities were on fire, people were screaming, not from injuries or fear, but from confusion, from chaos, from betrayal. I saw tornadoes, tsunamis, storms that ripped entire neighborhoods apart in seconds. I saw the sky turn black as red light poured over skyscrapers and forests alike. It wasn't nature, it wasn't climate, it was judgment. People ran, but there was nowhere to hide. I saw them grabbing children, calling loved ones, dropping to their knees in the street. Some were praying, others were cursing, and in the shadows between buildings I saw them again. The demons, walking among the chaos, smiling, whispering, deceiving, leading. Not by force, but with lies that people wanted to believe. They weren't hiding, they weren't afraid, they were rejoicing, because the world had become their playground. I turned to Jesus, my heart pounding. What is this? He looked at the devastation, what is to come if they do not turn back. Terror like I had never felt settled into my soul, not just for myself, but for the world, for everyone still alive, still unaware, still mocking the truth. They don't know, I whispered. They think it's all just talk, stories, religion. They have no idea. Jesus nodded slowly. That is why I'm sending you back. I stared at him. Back? After all this? After everything you've shown me? His voice grew firm, but not harsh. You have seen what most never will. Now you must speak. Tell them, warn them, because soon the door will close. And when he said those words, I felt it. Something shift in the spirit, like a countdown had begun. A divine clock ticking toward a moment the world wasn't ready for. And most would miss it. Not because they hated God, but because they never made time for Him. Because they were too busy, too numb, too distracted. He wasn't showing me these things for drama or fear. He was showing me because He still loves them. Because even now, still, He's giving people a chance to wake up before it's too late. And I knew from that moment on, everything in my life would change. Because I had seen what was coming, and I had been called to warn them. The moment He said the words, "Soon the door will close," the air shifted. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like everything around me tensed. The light, the ground, even my own spirit. Like all of heaven was holding its breath. And that's when the vision changed again. Not just the burning world, not just the destruction, but something far more chilling. I saw people, regular people, walking through their daily lives with smiles on their faces, earbuds in, coffee in hand. They laughed, joked, posted selfies, texted their friends. It looked so normal, so harmless. But Jesus was still beside me, and He lifted His hand. And in that instant, I saw what He saw. I saw the spiritual world hidden beneath the surface of everything we call ordinary. I saw chains, thousands of them, wrapped around people who had no idea they were bound. Chains made of lies, of pride, of lust and envy and greed. Some of them were heavy and obvious, but others were thin, almost invisible, so carefully woven into their daily routines that they thought they were free. I saw the way words spoken in gossip turned into actual blades, cutting into the people being talked about. I saw how bitterness created black roots that grew from the heart and spread like weeds into relationships, communities, even churches. I saw people scrolling endlessly on their phones, unaware that their attention was being stolen, not by entertainment, but by forces that wanted them distracted long enough to miss their last chance. And then I saw the marks. On the foreheads of every person, there were marks. Some glowed with radiant light, clear, pure, a sign of belonging, a sign they had truly surrendered to Jesus, that they were His. But others had marks so dark, so deeply embedded, they pulsed with evil. Some people had both, light trying to shine through but being choked out by compromise. And the worst part? Most of the people with the dark marks thought they were safe. They went to church, they prayed, they wore the right clothes, said the right words. But their hearts were hollow, their faith was shallow. It was all routine, performance, a checklist. There was no relationship, no surrender. I turned to Jesus, horrified. What happens to them? They think they're saved, they think they're okay. His voice was steady but heavy. Unless they turn to me with their whole heart, they will not enter my kingdom. Those words crushed me, not because they were unfair, but because they were true, and I saw it. I saw how so many people mistake religion for relationship. They think saying a prayer once is enough, that believing in me but never living for me is fine, that grace means they don't have to change. But their lives never reflected me. Their hearts never belonged to me. They wanted blessings but not obedience. They wanted heaven but not holiness. And then the light dimmed again, and something new appeared in front of us. A book, massive, floating in midair, surrounded by fire, not the fire of hell, but holy fire, pure and unapproachable. The Book of Life. It glowed with authority, with weight, with truth. I felt my knees buckle at the sight of it. Jesus opened it, page after page flipping, names glowing like stars written in fire. These were the ones who belonged to him, the ones who had chosen him, truly chosen him, not just with words, but with their lives. I saw names I recognized. My grandmother, a teacher who used to pray for us after school, a guy from my youth group I never took seriously, but then I saw the spaces, blank, empty, names that should have been there, but weren't. I saw people I had known, people who thought they were good, people who believed in God, but they had never followed him, and their names had never been written, or worse, some had been written once, but now they were gone, faded, like they had been gently wiped from the pages by the choices they made later in life. I couldn't breathe. Can they come back? I asked, desperate, panicked. Is there still time for them? Jesus looked at me, sorrow deep in his eyes. As long as they have breath, they have a chance. But soon, that chance will be gone. And then I saw something I will never forget for the rest of my life. An angel appeared, radiant, powerful, burning with the presence of God. He didn't speak like we do. His voice carried through creation itself. The time is near, he said. Judgment is coming. Many will be lost. His voice didn't tremble. He wasn't afraid. But the weight of what he said shattered me. And then he added one more thing. Tell them, warn them, before the door closes forever. I wanted to cry out for more time, more chances. I wanted to plead for the world to wake up. But the vision shifted again. Now I was looking at the earth as it is today, peaceful, distracted, asleep, people living like nothing was wrong, smiling, planning vacations, falling in love, starting careers they didn't know, they couldn't see, but beneath it all, darkness was growing, creeping, wrapping around their ankles like vines, and no one noticed. Jesus turned to me. His voice was quiet, but full of command. Tell them what you have seen. And then I felt it, a force pulling me backward, away from him, away from the light. Wait, I cried. I don't want to leave, not yet. But it was too late. In an instant, I was back. The pain hit like a truck, and I gasped as my body came crashing back to life. I heard shouting, beeping machines. "We've got a pulse!" someone yelled. My vision blurred, my chest burned. I was alive, but everything had changed. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. I wanted to scream what I had seen, to tell everyone in the room what was coming, but they wouldn't understand. They hadn't seen it. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames, faces, names fading from the book. My parents thought I was just traumatized. My friends made jokes, but I knew the truth. I had seen eternity. I had been sent back to warn them, not just to inspire them, not to make them feel good, but to wake them up. So that's what I started doing. I told my family. Some believed me, Some didn't. I told my friends. Most laughed it off. I started writing it down, telling strangers, posting online, not because I wanted attention, but because I had seen too much to stay silent. I saw what happens to those who think they have time. I saw what happens to those who play church, who delay surrender, who call Jesus Lord but never follow him. And I saw the love in his eyes, a love that still waits, but not for long. If you're hearing this, please listen. I was dead, gone, for only a few minutes. But in that time, I saw everything. Heaven, hell, the spiritual war we pretend isn't real, the demons waiting for a single opening, the gates of heaven that only open for those who truly know him, the book of life, the angel's warning, Jesus' voice telling me to tell you, this is real, you don't have forever, and once the door closes, it will never open again.